Hi, I'm William Dale Rowland, Vicar William, Vicar SMP of Discipleship here at Peace Lutheran Church in Hurst, Texas. Each week I'm sitting down with one of the leaders here at Peace to answer your questions, discuss relevant social topics, and dive deeper into recent sermons so that we can learn how to better apply Scripture to our daily lives. I'm joined today by Josh Anderson, our head elder here at Peace. How's it going?
It's going great. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, awesome. So, for those of you who are new to the show, you can send in your questions or topic suggestions to info@peacechurch.org. We'd love to talk about whatever is on your mind. Just a reminder, this is a candid, unscripted conversation. All right, so what is your role here at Peace?
You know what? If you would ask me that question a couple years ago, I probably couldn't answer that question. Truth be told.
Yeah.
So, what is an elder? Honestly, what we have actually as a peace community, elder community, we tried to better establish and communicate really those responsibilities and make sure that that is a little bit more well known, certainly to the elders, and hopefully even through this this kind of videotaping, it can be more well known across the congregation as well. But in essence, what we try to do is it's kind of the spiritual leaders, obviously above and beyond the pastors and the vicars and the staff here. But we really look after the spiritual welfare of Peace and of our constituents here at Peace. So unlike the board of directors, which may be a little bit more involved in some of the money and the kind of the bureaucratic types of decisions, we really care for the people themselves. And so we've kind of separated that within Peace. So the elders are really more in line with the spiritual welfare. So we will call people routinely, check up on them, see how they're doing, what needs they might have, how Peace might be able to come through for them and work with them in their lives. And so folks that may actually be in a facility or some kind of care, we may go visit them as well and encourage them in different ways, pray with them, so on and so forth.
And so does that go both ways with the people that you serve?
Without a doubt, yeah, we certainly hope so. So just like we're praying for them and looking for opportunities to best serve them, we certainly would be wanting and asking for their prayers and making sure that you can hold us accountable and making us the best that we can be as well.
I think that's good, that accountable, holding each other accountable. That's for me, that's such an action of discipleship, is being able to.
And at the end of the day, we're just people like everybody else. And so we want to serve. This is our opportunity to serve Peace and to serve the Lord. So we're going to fall down just like everybody else does. So I think a level of accountability is certainly very, very healthy and something that we certainly strive to do the best that we can to serve our Lord and to serve our community here at Peace.
All right, so just kind of details. So if we have a household out there that hasn't heard from their elder yet or heard from them in a while, what's the proper, how do they go about reaching out to their elder?
Yeah, so I would encourage anybody who's maybe in that boat who would like to hear from their elder at all or more is if you don't already have a relationship with an elder, go ahead and contact the church office.
Yeah.
And so we'll make sure and get the appropriate elder who's kind of been assigned to that particular family to give that person a call or a communication of their choice, whether that's an email or a text. But certainly phone call is a little bit more what we'd like to do, a little bit more personal.
Absolutely.
And we'll go about doing it that way.
Fantastic. So an elder can reach out to somebody, pray with them, offer spiritual guidance if it kind of comes to that.
Without a doubt, and I think at the end of the day, we're here for that particular person. We certainly don't have all the answers. Again, we're just in the same boat as anybody else. But I think what we really want to convey to the people at Peace is that we have people that are dedicated to really serving Peace in this fashion and walking alongside each other, encouraging one another in their spiritual lives.
Absolutely. So what have there been changes, you said, in the past couple of years? Have there been changes in the past couple of years that you want to talk about, or?
Well, I just think
stuff that you might be really excited about that the elders are taking on.
Well, listen, I think everybody here at Peace feels the new energy, with Pastor Brian and certainly you, William, and others here coming on board. a new staff re-energized. There's a lot to be excited about in peace in general. And so alongside that new leadership and new vision that Brian has certainly bestowed upon all of us, he's certainly outlined a little bit more about, hey, what is the expectations of an elder? What should we be focused on, both internally and then also then outwardly in serving the community at peace?
Absolutely.
And so when changes occur, and just like a lot of other service opportunities at peace, an elder position is generally a 2-year period of time. Sometimes it can be longer if someone raises their hand and say, no, I really, really enjoy this aspect of service at peace. I want to continue on this journey and serving in this capacity. We have many people that are on the elder team that have been on there for many years.
So is this something that people are put up for? Is that how you got into it? Did somebody approach you?
Somebody approached me now a couple years ago, and so this is now year 2 for me that I'm doing this. And so this will, I guess, now be year 3. I've done it now 2 years. Someone who is on the elder team, we talk about it as an elder community, as an elder team, and saying, hey, we really believe that this particular individual embodies kind of the spirit, so to speak, the characteristics, the criteria of what we believe would be a really good elder for peace. And so then we would come up to that particular individual when that time is appropriate, when we have an opening on the elder team as an example, and ask them if they would be willing and able to serve in this capacity.
Fantastic. And before we move too much further, after the reinvigoration of peace, I think is something we can all feel.
No doubt.
To think that God is even using me as a part of that is beyond me. Because I know when my family and I showed up here, we were back row, kind of slip in, slip out family. And it really just, and I'm sure this happened with you in your journey too, is somebody sees something, somebody talks to you. Sometimes that can be the whole difference for people who come into our doors, or people who slip in and slip out, kind of catching them and saying, no, we're both disciples. Let's do this together.
That's exactly right.
And that can be so huge.
That's exactly right. At the end of the day, we're all just instruments for God to do what His will through us.
Yes.
And so to your point, I have a similar experience. I think a year ago, I would never have guessed that I would be doing something like this, or a podcast with Pastor Brian, or serving in front of the congregation. But these are just things that I believe that God is starting to call me to do more and more. But I'm just like anybody else out there, which is really an exciting thing that God's working in my life, but I think in a lot of our lives here, which is really what I think is so exciting, invigorating, and something that we can look into the future as far as how peace is continuing to evolve.
Okay, so I'm sure it's going to go over my head, but just so I think we have a lot of times with our church family, we have this kind of dual personality. So we know you as Elder Josh Anderson.
Yes.
What do you do outside of here?
So I work for Alcon Vision. I work for a small subsidiary of our company that is on the surgical device side. So I actually work within a smaller department, our surgical retina team there. And so I head up our sales and marketing team for the United States. So I have a team of about 30 or 35 people underneath me, and just have been incredibly blessed, extremely fulfilled in what I'm doing, working very closely with our customers, our surgeons, really bringing more and more innovation and new products to help people see better. It's an incredible just journey that I've been on for the last 22 years. A lot of fun, a lot of work, but a lot of fun.
So as a disciple, so how do you see your work feeding into what you do here, or vice versa, seeing what's happening here and what God's doing for you spiritually, feeding into your work?
So it's funny, I think the work, again, I used the word instrument earlier, I would say probably the same thing. That is an outlet for what I think I'm being called to do in general by God, and that is to positively impact as many lives as I possibly can, and in some way, shape, or form, being a conduit for the Holy Spirit to bring more people to Christ. Okay. And so whether that is through an outlet of allowing people to see better, but candidly, it's just conversations, it's interactions with different people, it's connecting with different people. And through those connections, magic can happen.
Yeah, I know, and I know when I made the decision to go kind of into full-time ministry versus what I was doing, which was teaching. That was kind of the hardest thing to let go of, was to say, oh, God's still going to find a way in the classroom, because that's where I found a lot of where God was leading me, was with my students. So I can completely understand that.
Yeah.
It's really cool to see that crossover, and I think for people at Peace to know what those lives are outside of the church, because so often we get caught between two masks.
Yeah.
This is the mask for these people. This is the mask for those people. When in reality, our life is whole. that's the way God made us.
Well, it's whole. You wear a lot of hats in your
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
In addition to be a vicar, and how passionate you are in that stage in your life and where you're going, that path. I mean, you're a husband, you're a
Yeah,
father,
yeah.
you're a member of the community, you're a neighbor. I mean, there's so many different hats that we all wear, and so there's so many opportunities that we have to connect with different people in various ways and bring the good news to people.
Did you hear that? Did everybody hear that? Good, good. All right, so I've asked everybody to bring in a Bible passage. If you're new to the show, that means something to you as a way to kind of get to know you a little bit better, and to kind of feed our conversation. So what Bible passage did you bring in for us?
Yeah, so I brought in Mark chapter 4,
Mm-hmm.
verses 35 through 41. And this is the Bible passage in which Jesus calms the storm.
Yes.
And, I don't know if it's necessarily my favorite Bible passage. There's so many quote unquote favorites that I have. But I think just in my life over the last few years, maybe more so than they ever have, I've just felt like there's been more and more storms. There's been more and more adversity, whether it's in my life directly, people that are around me in the periphery. And candidly, let's just look outside of Josh Anderson and my world, but just the world in general.
Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of turmoil going on right
Yeah.
now. And so I think this particular passage offers so much. It's interesting. I was listening to another podcast here not too long ago, and it was being described first and foremost as understanding Jesus and who that particular man, not only God, but man truly is. As we've been talking a little bit in Sunday school and some of the other things that we've been doing, John Mark and in the book of Mark, it was actually the first book to be written.
Yeah.
Just about 10 or 12 years ago, we think, after the death of and resurrection of Christ. So it's really short time. So what John really did through his entire, John Mark, did the entire gospel there was to go to eyewitness accounts and go to people and interview them and get their insights. And it was amazing just looking at that particular passage and taking a step back at all the details in that particular passage. As an example, it talked about this instance happening at night.
Mm-hmm.
It talked about instances in which he was on one side of the Sea of Galilee, didn't leave the boat, and then went to another side of the Sea of Galilee, or is in the process, and people were following him on boats. Yeah. It talked about him ultimately falling asleep in the back of the boat on a cushion. All of this virtually doesn't necessarily add all that much, if at all, to the story.
Yeah.
And so it really raises the question of, why do we have all this detail? And it truly is detail into this. And as I think about it, and as I've talked to even other people about it, the only reasonable thing that I can come up with is because it really happened.
Yeah.
These were eyewitness accounts, and this is what people remember. And so I think that's really, really important, that as we consider getting into kind of the meat of this, is that all these different details point toward the truism and the reality that this event actually happened.
Yeah.
And as we get into this, and that I think the premise of this entire passage looks at how can we best, how do we learn to trust God in the storms of our lives? How do we trust Jesus in those inevitable storms? Knowing that this actually happened in this kind of a way, I think just adds that much more added power, or at least influence, on my life.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because even if you look at the other Gospels, and you know this, but for them, so two of the Gospels, Matthew and John, were written by disciples who were there. Luke and Mark were written from eyewitness accounts, so they interviewed the people who saw these things, and they fleshed it all out in those Gospels. Mark was the first account, I think, is what our typical understanding is that it was the first account. And it's also the shortest.
Right.
So even for it to have the kind of details that you're talking about does point to, no, I'm going to say this because this is what this person is telling me, so I'm just going to write it down like this person is telling me. I also, in this depiction, I always go back to these are fishermen.
Yes.
They know they know the Sea of Galilee.
Yeah.
Like the back of their hand. Like this is what they do.
Right.
Maybe not at night all the time, but I have no idea. That's just kind of what I would guess. But the fact that Sea of Galilee seems pretty tumultuous as it is, but the fact that they were so concerned points to a greater storm or serious doubt about what they're doing in their lives. And maybe it's a little bit of both that's playing at them there. What do you think?
Well, I looked at this just very practically as I've kind of studied this a little bit more as, Mount Hermon, which is a mountain about almost 10,000 feet above sea level. That's only about 30 miles away from the Sea of Galilee. Then when you get to the Sea of Galilee, it's about 700 feet below sea level. So you have this discrepancy of about 10,000 feet or so. And so with that, you can understand the cool air of the mountain along with the warm air of the Sea of Galilee. And that's where a lot of these kind of thunder boomers and thunderstorms and natural storms, I think inevitably do occur. I just think in general they do. But I think you bring up a really good point, is that many of the disciples were expert fishermen. This is what they did for a living. And on the Sea of Galilee. So they've seen their fair share of storms. So for this to get talked about and this to get written about as a storm of all storms, so to speak, to the point where we had these expert fishermen absolutely scared literally for their lives.
Yeah.
I mean, they had waves coming over the side of the boat. I can only imagine literally them trying to bail out this water, with some kind of buckets, because they knew they were literally probably seconds away from capsizing and probably drowning.
Yeah, and there's no telling how big the boat was even, for that matter.
Who knows? Yeah. Who knows? And then I just get this picture of Jesus in the back of the boat on a cushion amidst this storm of all storms, called a hurricane. I mean, it's just going, it's craziness to the point of these expert fishermen can barely, speak. They're so frantic. And then they come over to Jesus and they wake up Jesus and they're like, Lord, save us. What are you doing? You're sleeping, And as I think about that, and, a lot of times in the Bible, we get all these depictions of the disciples of kind of like, oh man, they're kind of acting like boneheads again, They're acting like I would act, right?
And yet, exactly, that's exactly what we would be doing.
So there's a lot of like, okay, I could see myself potentially doing that. But there's a lot of stories like that about the disciples. Again, the disciples are just like you and I, and all of us here. So
and there's this whole other aspect too that I think is even more applicable for us, which is the idea that they are thinking they're thinking of a lifespan, and yet what we do when we grab hold of this gospel is we realize, oh, we're eternal beings. this life that we have here on earth, this is small. Yeah, this is a small fraction of what we can experience in Christ, which is eternity.
That's
eternity with our Creator.
Yeah.
And yet, and it's something cool. Before if I'm afraid you're going to go past it,
No,
so I'm going to go ahead
please.
and bring it up. He calms the storm, right? And they say, who can this be? And they've made the decision to follow this man. This I don't know who they thought he was at this point. This prophet. this Messiah, but what they realized is, oh, this is somebody who actually controls nature,
Yeah.
nature itself.
Yeah.
And to think of all the miracles that they'd seen at that point, and the miracles that they're going to see, it's pretty amazing to make that decision to follow him before even realizing the full breadth of what he's capable of.
We have such a benefit compared to
Oh, yeah.
what the
Yeah.
disciples were going through in that particular moment. We've been able to see the entire story play out and study it. We've had those opportunities, but to put yourself in the position of the disciples at that particular point in time, they thought they were going to die.
Yeah.
And here their Lord and Savior is next to them sleeping. I'm sure if I were to put myself in that spot, I would have felt the exact same way. Like, do something, right? Don't you care about us? Don't you love us? You're going to allow us to die, you know? And I think that's, to some degree, the question that a lot of us have through storms is, if God really loves us, why does he allow these storms to occur in our lives? And I've thought a lot about that the last few years.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have a good question as to why. I don't think there is an answer to why.
Yeah.
Although I think I have.
There's nothing that's as clear cut as we would want, I think. And you're reading through the Bible in a year with the church. So we both just finished Job.
Sure.
Which is a whole other.
Wow.
And if you want to see an episode about that, Pastor Brian and I did talk about that last season, so check out season 1. But we just finished that, and so why does God allow these things to happen to good people? And the truth that we get from that is, well, we don't actually understand what he's doing.
That's right.
We know that he loves us, and we know that his will, for those of us who have had this experience, we know that his will is better than any plan that we can have for our lives. And that can be an absolute awakening when you realize that, oh, I've been working so hard on my thing. and the thing that I thought was what you wanted me to do, even, when in reality I just needed to let go of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's so many different potential answers as to why, but again, it would just be conjecture and maybe even irresponsible for me to even comment on it. But I do know the reason why it's not. It's not because he doesn't love me, and he doesn't love you, and he doesn't love all of us. And that's really his promise of sending his only son, Jesus Christ, to ultimately be the sacrifice for all of us to one day, make things right, conquer sin and death, and to ultimately be in eternity with him forever. Yeah. And so I do know that.
Yeah. And him taking care of us in that way is not just part of the story. It is the story. Like that.
Right.
That is the whole of Scripture.
That's right.
Is he loves us enough that he did these things.
Yeah.
That he sent his son. That he went through many different ways in the Old Testament, and then sent his son, as we see in the New Testament. They don't realize it at this point, but to die and to come back to life for our sake.
Yeah.
And that is, I can't say enough about it. So
well, the cool thing about the passage, there's a couple small little things in there that I really have learned to love and appreciate. And a lot of even previous like Old Testament prophets and even people even outside of Judaism and Christianity, they may call on a higher power, right? Hey, I summon God, or I call on God to come and do this, or whatever it may be. In this particular case, Jesus basically tells the wind and the waves, be quiet and be still.
Yeah.
Be quiet and stay quiet.
Yeah.
Almost like you would do to a toddler or to a dog or something like that, And so immediately the wind stopped, which you're like, okay, well, that would be really strange, but it could happen.
Yeah.
But imagine going through a hurricane, roughly, which is what we're talking about here, the storm of all storms, and then literally instantaneously it says the water's like glass.
Calm seas. Yeah.
It's like dead. And so, to the point, you can imagine what the disciples are going through at this point, and you get a sense of this in the passage, which I think is hilarious because I think I would feel the same way. I would be scared to death like they are. I'm going to die. I'm in the storm of all storms. And then all of a sudden, boom, Jesus commands with 4 words, be still, be quiet, stay quiet.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, everything is dead calm. And then how do they react? They become even more scared.
Yeah, even more terrified. Who is this guy?
That's it.
Yeah, back away.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you know, I've done a little bit more research on some of this stuff, and I believe there's a story in Maccabees, which I know is a part of the Apocrypha.
Yeah,
But it talks about you know, I think it's a Babylonian or a Syrian king of some sort that is just ruthless and claims to be able to, you know, calm the seas. And basically a bunch of the leaders come together and say that's not right because only God can do that.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit of a precursor, a little bit as to exactly what you know, Jesus does here.
Well, and that
It's
is
amazing.
so. And you know, since you referenced it, the Apocrypha was still a huge part of that Jewish tradition, and that kind of that pharisaical view, right? That foundation that they had. So these are the kind of stories that end up leading people like Nicodemus to go ask questions because they know only God can do that.
Right.
And then suddenly there's this man who's doing these sorts of things, who's raising people from the dead, and healing just with a word. And I think it's important to, you mentioned it, it's important to point out that Jesus didn't pray for these things, that he said it and it happened. Which
Incredible power.
Which really brings back even all the way to Genesis 1, creation.
Yeah.
You know, God spoke, and out of that nothingness came something.
It's interesting you referenced Genesis because that was also another thing on my mind. And the one thing that I've really enjoyed from this, kind of reading a little bit of the Bible every single day, and we'll do that through the rest of the year. I think it's been an incredible journey for me personally. And I'm going to encourage everybody to do that if they have that opportunity. But the way that you read the Bible, if you read it as just a set of stories, okay, that's interesting. Maybe there's some good lessons in there, you know, and maybe that can help you in your moral life. But if you read the Bible, especially the Old Testament, and pointing toward Jesus, and everything ultimately is about Jesus, and Jesus coming just confirms everything then in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
It's a completely different way of looking at how everything is tied together. And in this particular example, I want to kind of reference back to Jonah. So this was something we read not too long ago in our series. But you know, Jonah was a prophet, and he was on a boat, kind of at the beginning of was it what chapter it was or what book it was, but nonetheless, he was on.
I can't remember the exact chapter, but it's pretty early on in the story.
Very early on in the story, and he was basically running away from God at the time.
Yeah.
And there was a huge storm that came to him on the body of water, and the people that were in the boat said, "Hey, you know, what do we do?" And Jonah said, "God is mad at me. You need to throw me into the water and to kill me in order for you to save yourself." Yeah. And so it was referenced in Matthew later on that Jesus is the new Jonah.
Yeah.
Is the better Jonah. And you're looking at this particular passage.
And he says the only sign that you'll get is the sign of Jonah to the Pharisees at one point, right?
And that's right. Yeah. And so you could say, well, hold on, it isn't quite the same because Jesus didn't go into the water and he didn't die, but did he? So the rest of the story, as we know all too well, is Jesus ultimately going to the cross for us and basically embracing the most ultimate storm of all. You know, not only physical torture and humiliation and abandonment by his friends, but also ultimately the abandonment by his Father and going to hell, and all allowing us to ultimately be reconciled through Jesus Christ. So if you read the Bible in such a way, and this particular passage is just one example of that, it really provides, I think, a more meaningful type of notion that there's something, a bigger thing going on here.
Yeah.
Right? And as we kind of looked at some of these eyewitness types of accounts, as we can kind of go full circle back to this, it really is amazing. This really did happen, and ultimately what does it mean? And as you kind of see different things kind of tie together, it just strengthens or has the opportunity to strengthen your faith that much more.
Yeah,
Love in Jesus
and
Christ.
thank you for bringing that up, because it is so huge. It's really easy to pick out those verses, but reading those verses in context of the larger chapter of the larger book as a whole, as the larger Bible as a whole, that makes those verses, those passages, mean so much more. And it makes you question if this is what God wanted to say to us, and this is a limited thing, then this little thing must be important. And it takes time, as we've done, it takes on a whole bigger importance to dive into it the way that we've done, and really try to not just nitpick it, but then step back and say, okay, well, this is where he was in the ministry at this point. This is what the disciples had experienced, and this is what they're about to experience. Which, as we know, is going to be a lot more storms. A lot more storms.
Inevitably. And again, I'll just maybe my last comment here is I think this passage ultimately is learning how to trust Jesus in the storms of our life. Those things are inevitable, and Jesus never promises that we will never have storms. In fact, completely the opposite, but that he would always be there with us in those storms. And ultimately, I think that's the lesson, and hopefully the poise and just the calmness that we can all take with us is that inevitably when we do come across those storms in our lives, and there will be those storms, that Jesus is with us every step of the way, rooting us on, encouraging us, and loving us.
Absolutely. I think we'll close it up there. It's all right. So our next episode of Peace Beyond the Pulpit will air next Wednesday. That's June 22nd, 2022 at 11 a.m. My next guest will be the president of our board of directors here at Peace, Melanie Martin. Thank you so much for this conversation, Josh. This has been great. You can find Peace Lutheran Church in Hurst, Texas, online on Facebook, on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube. You can find us by our handle at Peace Church DFW. That's at Peace Church DFW. Join us for worship this weekend at 8:30 and 11. If you can't make it to the building, then we also have a live stream that you can find on Facebook or YouTube. Don't forget to email your questions to info@peacechurch.org. We'd love to talk about whatever is on your mind, so send those questions in right now. Please like and share this video, and I'll see you next week. God bless.